does TDA, Tren de Aragua, and MS-13 really fit the mold of a terrorist organization? Because that's why they conducted the strike today.
What do we got? Are the U.S. and Venezuela on the brink of war? I mean, first off, that's a sensational headline. Let's back that off a little bit. I don't think so. I don't think anybody wants any of that smoke. But Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro has accused the U.S. of attempting regime change through a significant naval buildup in the southern Caribbean, calling it the continent's most serious threat in a century. The deployment includes 7 warships and a nuclear-powered submarine, which the U.S. says is intended to combat Latin American drug cartels. Maduro rejected this rationale, arguing it's a pretext for destabilizing Venezuela, and emphasized that the country will defend its sovereignty. The U.S. has also doubled its reward for information leading to Maduro's arrest, citing alleged drug trafficking links. Tension between the two nations are rising, with Venezuela threatening military resistance and the international community divided over the risk of escalation. What I'll add to this, which is not in the notes that I'm reading, is in the time between this being written and sent to us, it appears as if the U.S., I'm going to assume Navy, had a tactical strike on a vessel in international waters that, from the best information I can gather, was a drug smuggling, drug running. I don't know the difference, honestly, at a technical term at that level. But that occurred within the last 24 hours. So a kinetic strike, I'm going to assume that there were casualties associated with that. So the question around this first part, and then we can go into the longer ties or the more existential ties to that actual tactical strike. The U.S. says its naval buildup near Venezuela is about fighting drug cartels, but some question if that's the real reason. From a national security perspective, what do you think is really at stake here, and what do you think could go wrong if tensions escalate, or if we fire a few missiles at a boat?
Well, I think that's much bigger conversation. I mean, you that's the macro conversation of like what could go wrong. I mean, exponentially, a lot could go wrong. I mean, I don't think much for U.S. forces. I think we have such a presence there. From what I understand, there's a battle group there. There's whether it's a battle group, whether there's a carrier. We know that there's a couple cruisers, a couple destroyers. I think 5,000 Marines that are off the coast of Venezuela right now. When I saw that at AG Bondi put the $50 million bounty on Maduro's head, I knew that I said that very day, as I was saying to my friends, I was like, I'm telling you right now, we're going to be striking Venezuela. We're going to be striking it. I mean, without a doubt, she was putting the target on him and then moving the pieces into position to strike Venezuela.
Can you talk about how? I mean, there's a FBI Most Wanted top 10. I think it is. Didn't there used to be a TV show around that too? FBI's Most Wanted.
Yeah, I mean, I think they do still do that. I think there's listen, of all those TV shows that are out there, none of them depict the FBI accurately. I mean, it's fucking Hollywood, so none of them.
But what does that mean? That level of monetary increase and it being discussed by Pam Bondi, who, correct me if I'm wrong, is basically the top law enforcement person in the U.S. system.
Right. Yeah, that's the person who sets the tone for law enforcement and around the world. But here's the thing: is it's not just law enforcement. I know a lot of people that were your former community that as soon as that $50 million bounty, there was conversations being had by members of the special retired communities, law enforcement, of like putting together a team that goes after that for a $50 million bounty. That's a lot of money. I don't think anyone got past the conversational because the amount of money that it would take to put, a team like that downrange and, go through Maduro's ranks and protection detail. It wasn't going to happen. It's not going to happen. So
Plus,
I think
they're probably going to make you pay tax on it. So let's just cut that thing in half to begin with.
Exactly. So, but like the $50 million is to try and get somebody that's inside Maduro's circles to turn on him and to give him. But Maduro's going to hunker down. He's not going to go someplace where he could get snatched. He's going to stay inside his circles. He's going to stay in Caracas. He's going to stay in Venezuela or fly securely to either North Korea or Russia where no one's going to get to him. So I think that it was more of a symbol than, to the $50 million reward that he is, criminal number one, most wanted. He's not on the 10 most wanted, but still, nonetheless, I think that this is definitely leading to a conversation, a bigger conversation, which I was having today is, does TDA, Tren de Aragua, and MS-13 really fit the mold of a terrorist organization? Because that's why they conducted the strike today. That on a boat that had allegedly 11 members of TDA, and they had narcotics on the boat, and it was leaving Venezuela. I'm assuming the intelligence, going with the argument that the intelligence was correct, that those were members of TDA. Great. Mm-hmm. Does TDA, per the definition of what we all grew up in, in GWAT, that is that a terrorist group? I could argue that it isn't. But are they, putting their political, ideological, are they pushing forward here in the United States? The drug cartels, that's a different story. Drug cartels, CJNG, Sinaloa, you could definitely easily argue that. Those are military groups that could take over small countries. So that's a completely different conversation. But is TDA a terrorist group, a terrorist organization? That to me is where the conversation can be had. And listen, I'm all for saying, having investigated these guys for most of my career, I can say definitively MS-13 does not fit the definition of what a terrorist organization as a threat to U.S. interests. It does not. So calling them a terrorist group and then opening up, okay, we can do kinetic strikes. What's next if President Bukele, president of El Salvador, he decides, okay, here's a boat that's leaving. It's full of MS-13 members. They're trying to escape. Are we conducting a strike on that? What if there wasn't drugs? I mean, the conversation would be completely different if they were shown to be supporting, ISIS, Hamas, and then that boat had members of ISIS and Hamas on the boat and they were escaping. That's a different conversation. But they said, according to the administration, it was narcotics on that boat.
Yeah.
So again, where's the line grow? Are we striking within Venezuela? I don't think Venezuela has the infrastructure to really pose a threat here to A, to CONUS, and B, very limited threat to our forces off the coast. So I think we're safe when it comes to that. But now the question is then, if the main cartel in Venezuela is Cartel del Sol. If Cartel del Sol has business interests with the Mexican cartels, will the Mexican cartels do something here in the United States to support Cartel del Sol? So it kind of would be, or over the edge there of different groups maybe supporting Venezuela.
Everybody, let's be real with each other for a second. Most doctors do not care about optimization. They do care about you, but they're checking your basic labs. They tell you that everything is looking normal, and they're going to send you on your way. Meanwhile, you're feeling tired, your performance is slipping, and you know that something is off, and that is where Marek Health comes in. Marek Health isn't your typical doctor's office. They're a next-level health optimization platform that actually listens to you, runs advanced lab testing, and helps you optimize your hormones, your metabolism, and your overall performance. So whether you're looking to boost your energy, maybe gain some muscle mass, or you just feel like you're not your best self anymore and you want to change that, Marek gives you those tools and can help you make it happen. You have two options. You can go with their guided optimization program and get a dedicated health coach and medical provider to help you with supplements and prescription treatments. Or if you're more of a do-it-yourself type of person, you can order self-service lab tests and take control of your health on your own terms. The best part is, either option that you pick, you can get 10% off of your order right now. Just go to marekhealth.com and use the code FOCALPOINT at checkout. That's MAREK health.com with the code FOCALPOINT for 10% off. I'm trying to remember, didn't the current administration declare, I know they declared some aspects of some cartels to be FTOs, foreign terrorist organizations.
Yeah.
Was Tren de Aragua part of that?
Yeah.
So they made that declaration. I wonder, I am not an expert when it comes into the legalities of using lethal force from like a naval vessel perspective in an international war. I am by no stretch an expert in those levels of constitutionality or what American forces can do or international law. But I wonder if by declaring them as that FTO, that to some degree opened the door for a direct kinetic act. I don't know if I can recall, though, and maybe it's because it wasn't published or I wasn't paying attention, Do you know of any other situation in an international water where the United States chose a kinetic action over a boarding, search and seizure?
Not that I can think of against a group that wasn't an FTO. Not that I, off the top of my head, could doing a kinetic strike.
Yeah.
This traditionally was always law enforcement action. You saw Coast Guard,
Yep.
DEA. I mean, you've seen that video of that Coast Guardsman,
Jumping on the
conducting a
sub.
boarding on the submarine,
Yep.
on the mini sub. So we know that this has been done. Are we winning the war? No, we're never going to win the war. Even doing these kinetic strikes, we're not going to win the war. So the question therein lies is where does, what is the end goal here? For me, my question is, okay, we're doing strikes on TDA members who I
Hmm.
do not define as there are groups and where, so my argument would be then, okay, that bucket right there, TDA and MS-13 were put in the terrorist bucket along with the cartels. And I'm
Yeah.
not debating that. That is a good, easy argument for me to say, yeah, they're terrorist organizations. But TDA and MS-13 were put into this bucket because they're a organization that the U.S. defines as a group, that's posing a direct threat to the U.S. interests. Okay, where is the line? So why were those put in that group? Are Bloods and Crips in Chicago posing just as big of a threat, if not more, killing more than TDA? Yes. Other
Locally, for
OMGs,
sure.
Hells Angels, pagans, they're moving narcotics allegedly from other countries. There's groups of members of OMGs. I'm not saying any one group is doing it, but there are outlaw motorcycle gangs that have, been indicted for moving narcotics. They could be, if you're using the same definition to define TDA. So is a Canadian organized crime element in Canada, could we define them as an FTO? And
Hmm.
because they're moving narcotics down here. So that is my debate, and I'd love to hear, have conversation about it, because saying, what do we traditionally, you and I, our generation growing up, ISIS, Hamas, Al Qaeda, that is what we've known because they want death to America. These groups are looking to sell their narcotics here in the United States. For me, they're a criminal organization, not a terrorist organization. So having that line kind of be moved so that TDA and MS-13 get included, well, if that line is moved, then Bloods, Crips, OMGs, other Trinitarios, which is a Dominican street gang, which is stealing tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars from U.S. senior citizens using their scams. They're selling drugs in New York City, New Jersey, Florida. So that group too. So that's what I'm saying is the conversation can be had as to a bigger picture of other
Yeah.
groups can be put into that bucket now.
Yeah, and I know very little details about this strike, and I don't think they've actually released a lot about the the five Ws. Well, who they kind of said what and how, but not necessarily the why. That hasn't come out yet, so I don't want to hypothesize on that. But again, I'm thinking of this from the perspective. Okay, they were declared FTO. Understand that, so that probably provides tactical options. But this is the first time I can think of that a purely narcotics entity was struck kinetically. I wonder where that moves the line. Are we now opening up? Are we marching towards drone strikes in Mexico? Or are we You know what I mean? If drone strikes north of the border, I'm just curious. This move is something different than I have seen, and I again don't have enough information to really judge it on its merits. To me, the bigger question is where does the next foot land?
That's exactly my question is where's the next footland? Because where is the line? And where is the
Yeah.
line? Are we conducting strikes, in Mexico against CJNG and Sinaloa? We know the strength of those cartels, but also are we doing it with the Mexican cooperation and with cooperation of the Mexican government? We know, it's not a secret that many members of the Mexican government, all the way down to the local police department, are corrupt. Have been corrupted by the cartels.
Mhm.
They pay them. So, do we do these strikes without Mexican cooperation to do OPSEC to make sure that the strike is less secure, or do we do it without their cooperation and or with them with the risk of there's lots of variables, lots of questions, and to me, if those 11 members of TDA were on that boat with the narcotics that is being reported, okay, I see I understand that that's obviously been a traditional law enforcement action. Where is the line? Where is the slippery slope? And I know that I've discussed this before, and I think I've talked to you about it, because it's just like, where is the line? What are the ramifications? What are the, blowbacks? If we do strikes in Mexico, let's say we do strikes in Mexico, we take out a CJNG, drug house, and, are we putting boots on the ground? Is it purely drone strikes? Are we, putting special operators on the ground, or are we sending in, Marines just across the border to push back the line a little bit? What if we know that the cartels have, thousands of individuals here in the United States that support them. What if they turn into and start hitting our local towns and as retaliation? So there's lots of things that, you have to think about. Okay, well, what's next? For example, like I said, what's going to be done after, Venezuela, this strike on the boat? Okay, are we going to be going into the land? Are we striking? Is it
do we strike them before they get on the boat? Do we wait till international water? Do we follow the TDA pipeline, through Mexico? I have none of those answers. And again, like I said, I may not have paid attention. It may not have hit my radar, but I just can't think of something that I can remember that was this kinetic on that type of a target. So
right.
I'm curious to see which direction it goes. I think it does definitely move the line. I just don't know to where.